She vanished in the Himalayas. And for 8 long years, the mountain kept its secret. The Himalayas are not just mountains. They are giants of rock and ice, stretching into the sky, silent and ancient. For centuries, they have tested explorers, climbers, and dreamers. Many reached the top. Some never returned. Avalanches, storms, sudden drops in oxygen. These peaks demand respect, and when someone disappears here, they often disappear forever. But this story felt different. She was not a reckless hiker. She was careful, prepared, and experienced. She had crossed dangerous trails before, camped alone in frozen valleys, and faced storms that would send others home. Friends said she knew how to survive. Family said she always left a plan. She carried a GPS watch, an action camera, even backup batteries. She was smart. She was strong. And yet, she vanished without a trace. No footprints. No tent. No call for help. Just silence. For years, her family searched. Helicopters flew over ridges. Rescue teams scanned valleys. Sherpas and locals asked questions in mountain villages. But nothing appeared. It was as if the Himalayas had swallowed her whole. And as the years passed, her name slowly moved from the news into cold case files, from hopeful conversations into whispers of mystery. 8 years. That's how long the mountains stayed quiet. Until one summer, something changed. The monsoon rains that year were heavier than anyone expected. Rivers rose. Trails vanished under floods. Glaciers cracked and shifted. And when the waters finally calmed, the mountain gave something back. A mountaineer, passing through a remote section of the range, noticed pieces of gear buried in the ice. At first, it looked like the usual debris left behind by climbers. Torn straps, fragments of nylon, rusted metal. But then, he spotted something different. A broken GPS watch, its screen cracked, but its memory chip still intact. And next to it, an action camera, scratched and battered, but still sealed shut by its waterproof case. For the first time in years, there was hope. For the first time in years, there was proof. When investigators recovered the devices, they realized the mountain hadn't erased everything. Inside were digital traces, altitude logs, heart rate data, and blurred images that hinted at her final days. What they found shocked even the most experienced rescuers, because the numbers on the GPS, the last pictures from the camera, they told a story that no one was ready to hear. A story of a journey that went off course. A story of a hiker who may not have been alone. A story hidden in the snow, waiting to be uncovered by melting ice. 8 years after she vanished, the Himalayas finally whispered back, and what they revealed was more chilling than anyone expected. So the question remains, what really happened to her in those final hours? She was 30 years old when she set her sights on the Himalayas. To her friends, she was adventurous. To her family, she was careful. To herself, she was simply alive when she was in the mountains. Her name was Elena Fisher. Born in a quiet town near Frankfurt, she never quite fit into city life. The noise, the traffic, the endless routine, it all felt heavy. But when she stepped onto a trail, when she felt the crunch of gravel under her boots and the sting of cold wind against her face, everything changed. The wilderness was where she belonged. By her 20s, Elena had already walked paths that most people only dreamed of. She hiked the Dolomites in Italy, trekked across the Carpathians in Romania, and camped alone in Norway, north of the Arctic Circle. Each trip had taught her something. How to stay calm in sudden weather. How to read the ground when maps failed. How to carry only what mattered most. But the Himalayas were different. They weren't just another challenge. They were the dream, the roof of the world, the place every climber whispered about, half in fear, half in awe. She spoke about it to her sister, Anna. "One trip there," Elena said, "and I'll feel like I've lived 100 lives." Anna worried, of course. Why go alone? Why take the risk? Elena only smiled. Because the silence there is the kind you can't find anywhere else. Her love for solitude was not recklessness. She planned. She prepared. Every journey began with research. She studied weather reports, mapped emergency exits, and left detailed itineraries with her family. She carried backup batteries, a GPS watch, a small emergency beacon. Her camera was always with her too, not just for photos, but because she believed that documenting her steps was its own kind of safety. Friends teased her for being over-organized, but Elena believed survival depended on it. "The mountain doesn't forgive mistakes," she once said, "so you don't make them." Her journals showed the same careful spirit. In one entry, she wrote, "Every trail teaches me something new, but I want the Himalayas to teach me everything." In the spring of her 30th year, she finally decided. 10 days, a solo trek across one of the less crowded routes of the Indian Himalayas. Not Everest, not Annapurna. She wasn't chasing fame. She wanted solitude, the quiet spaces where the peaks touch the sky. She began training months before. Early morning runs, weekend hikes with a weighted pack. She learned about altitude sickness, memorized symptoms, and prepared remedies. She was ready, and when she set out, everything looked perfect. Her gear was tested. Her route was clear. She was calm, confident, excited, but mountains do not care about preparation. Her first photos from the trip told a story of joy. A sunrise over a ridge, golden light flooding the valley, a stream crossing, water glinting on rocks, a simple campfire, her boots resting nearby. Each picture looked like freedom. Each caption felt like peace. Yet in the shadows of those peaks, storms were always waiting. And somewhere beyond those first few days, her trail would slip into silence. Because her last journey began the same way as all the others, with care, with planning, with hope. But it did not end the same way. Elena never treated her adventures like casual trips. She treated them like missions. Her packing list was meticulous. A red windbreaker jacket, bright enough to be seen from a distance. A lightweight tent, designed to resist sudden Himalayan winds. A sleeping bag tested for sub-zero nights. Freeze-dried meals, enough for 10 days, carefully divided into packs. A small stove and fuel tablets. A GPS watch strapped to her wrist, logging every step and heartbeat. An action camera, always within reach. And a compass passed down from her grandfather. More sentimental than practical. She carried only what she could trust. Every strap, every zipper, tested before she left. Her route plan was just as detailed. She would begin from a known base village, hike up through marked trails, cross into higher valleys, then circle back toward the glaciers before descending. She shared this plan with her sister, Anna, sending her a copy along with weather notes. "I'll check in every evening," she promised. And she did. On day 1, she sent a photo at sunrise. She was standing on a ridge, her red jacket zipped up, clouds rolling below her. The caption read, "Higher than the noise of the world." On day 2, she shared a picture of her camp by a glacial stream. Her boots were drying on a rock, steam rising from her stove. Caption, "Dinner with the best view." Day 3 brought a shot of her smiling against a backdrop of snow-capped peaks. She looked tired but happy. Caption, "The mountain makes you small, but in a good way." Each message carried her voice, her spirit, her joy. Her family and friends felt reassured. She wasn't reckless. She was steady, thoughtful, alive. Day 4 was the last message. A short clip of her walking across loose stone. The sound of her boots crunching against rock. She laughed into the camera, pointing at the peaks behind her. Caption, "Feels like the edge of the world." And then, silence. The evening check-in never came. No photo, no message, no GPS ping. At first, her sister thought maybe Elena was out of signal range. It wasn't unusual in the mountains. But when hours turned into a day, unease crept in. By the second day, unease had become fear. Elena had never gone quiet before. Not once. By day 6, authorities were alerted. Rescue teams were mobilized. Helicopters searched valleys. Locals scanned trails. But the mountain was vast, and Elena had left no trail beyond her last photo. That short clip, with her smile against the wind, would become haunting, because it carried no warning, no sign of danger. She looked free, confident, exactly as she always did. And yet, that was the last time anyone heard from her. When Elena's check-ins stopped, her family acted quickly. They knew her routine. She never missed a message. By the 6th day, local authorities were contacted. Within hours, the call spread across the valleys. Sherpas, guides, and villagers were alerted. A search began. Helicopters lifted off at dawn, their blades cutting through the thin mountain air. From above, rescuers scanned the ridges and valleys, eyes straining for the smallest sign. A red jacket against white snow, a piece of gear, a tent. On the ground, teams of Sherpas set out on foot, carrying ropes, radios, and hope. Rescue dogs were flown in, noses trained to catch a human scent even through layers of snow. But the Himalayas don't give up their secrets easily. The weather shifted as if it were against them. The same week Elena went silent. A storm swept across the region. Heavy winds howled through the valleys. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets. Landslides cut off paths. Trails that had been clear days earlier were buried under rock and ice. Helicopters were grounded for 2 days, unable to see through the swirling clouds. When the skies cleared, the damage was done. Any tracks she might have left were gone. Footprints erased. Tent poles buried. A trail of clues wiped clean. Still, the teams pressed forward. They retraced her known route, climbing the same ridges she had marked on her map. In some places, they found evidence of her passage. A cooking spot where stones had been arranged, a flattened patch of grass where a tent might have stood. But these were only guesses. Nature had blurred the details. Then came the single, fragile clue. Near the edge of a glacier, a team of Sherpas found footprints. Faint, shallow, half covered by fresh snow. They were spaced apart, moving steadily forward. They seemed to match her size, her boots. Hope surged. Perhaps she had crossed into the glacier, maybe sheltering in a cave, maybe waiting. But just as quickly as the prints began, they ended. The trail stopped in the middle of the ice, as if she had vanished into thin air. No sign of struggle, no broken gear, no drag marks, no blood. Just nothing. Theories began almost immediately. Some believed she had fallen into a hidden crevasse, one of the deep, narrow cracks that split the glacier's surface. A single misstep could send someone plunging down into darkness, swallowed forever by ice. Others thought she might have been caught in an avalanche. Snowslides can happen without warning, sweeping everything into a frozen grave. But not everyone was convinced. The footprints disturbed them. If she had fallen, why did the tracks stop so neatly? If it had been an avalanche, why wasn't there debris, torn fabric, broken poles, scattered supplies? It was as though she had walked into the glacier and disappeared. Rescuers stayed for weeks. They covered valley after valley, flying search grids, scanning ridges with binoculars, calling her name into the wind. But the mountains answered only with silence. One helicopter pilot later said, "It's like the earth itself closed over her, like she was never here at all." By the 10th day of searching, the official mission was scaled back. Resources were stretched thin. The weather turned worse again. Crews returned home. The report was blunt. No conclusive evidence has been found to determine the location or condition of Elena Fisher. To authorities, the case became just another disappearance in the Himalayas. To her family, it became an open wound, because the truth was unbearable. A woman so prepared, so careful, had simply walked into the mountains and not come back. And the only trace she left behind was a line of footprints that ended in silence. The official search ended after 10 days, but for Elena's family, it never truly ended. Her sister Anna refused to believe the mountains had simply taken her. "People don't just disappear," she said in interviews. "There has to be something, a trace, a reason." Every year on the anniversary of Elena's last message, Anna returned to the Himalayas. She walked parts of Elena's planned route, spoke to locals, and left flowers at trailheads. Her face became familiar to villagers, guides, and Sherpas. Some pitied her. Others respected her persistence. But no one forgot the woman in the red jacket who had never come home. At home in Germany, Elena's room remained untouched. Her climbing gear stayed in the corner. Her notebooks were stacked neatly on the desk. Her sister kept her phone contract active, paying the bill year after year, unable to let the number go dark. Sometimes, she would dial it, just to hear the voicemail. "This is Elena. Leave a message, and I'll call you back." She never did. As time passed, her story slipped from headlines into obscurity. The world moved on. Other hikers went missing. Other disasters captured attention. But online, in small corners of the internet, the case remained alive. Reddit threads dissected every known detail. True crime forums speculated endlessly. Some users posted satellite images, trying to match landmarks from her last photos. Others compared weather reports to her GPS data, debating whether storms had forced her off the trail. And then came the rumors. Truckers passing through the region began to whisper about sightings. Stories of a lone woman in red, glimpsed high up near the glaciers. Sometimes she was just a flash of color against the rock. Sometimes a figure standing still on a ridge, silent and unmoving. By the time anyone tried to approach, she was gone. One climber swore he saw her from across a ravine. She lifted her hand, like she was waving, he told a local guide. Then the fog closed in, and she wasn't there anymore. Another hiker claimed he found boot prints in fresh snow near where she had last been seen. But when he brought others to verify, the prints had vanished beneath new drifts. Skeptics dismissed these stories as projections, people seeing what they wanted to see. "The mountain plays tricks," one Sherpa explained. "The wind moves snow, shadows shift, and your eyes create ghosts." But Anna collected every report, every email, every shaky phone photo, every vague sighting. She pinned them to a board in her home, drawing lines between dates and places, trying to see a pattern. To her, the stories weren't just rumors. They were proof that her sister was still out there in some form. The family's grief became its own kind of ritual. On birthdays, they baked her favorite cake, but left her seat empty. At Christmas, they hung her stocking, still filling it with small gifts. Friends urged them to let go, to accept that she was gone. But Anna refused. "As long as the mountain hasn't given her back," she said, "I can't stop looking." And so the years dragged on. 8 winters passed, each one covering the glacier in deeper silence. 8 summers came, melting snow and carving rivers through the ice. Each year, searches returned for a few days, just to try again. Each year, they left with nothing. But mysteries have a way of refusing to stay buried. And the Himalayas were not finished with Elena's story. 8 years passed. The world had nearly forgotten Elena's name. Her sister still searched. Her story still lived in corners of the internet. But for most people, she was just another missing hiker, another cold case swallowed by the Himalayas. And then, the mountain moved. The summer of that 8th year was unlike any other. Heavy monsoon rains lashed the valleys for weeks, flooding rivers, washing out trails, and loosening rock faces. Higher up, where glaciers had stood firm for decades, the ice began to shift. Sheets of snow cracked like thunder. Streams of meltwater carved new paths down the slopes. The Himalayas were changing, fast, dangerous, and unforgiving. For mountaineers, this kind of weather was risky. But for the mountain itself, it meant release. Ice that had held secrets for years began to give them back. It was late July when Simon Keller, a seasoned mountaineer, climbed through a narrow ridge near a glacier that few tourists ever saw. He had trekked this route before, mapping changes in the ice, noting how quickly the landscape was melting. But on this trip, something caught his eye. At first, it looked like ordinary debris, ripped nylon, half buried under fresh ice. Many climbers lose scraps of gear to storms or avalanches, but when he brushed away the snow, he realized this was different. The fabric was old, faded from years in the elements. Torn straps dangled from a metal buckle, rusted but recognizable. He crouched closer. There was more. A cracked GPS watch, its screen spider-webbed with fractures. The strap was stiff, frozen in place, but the body of the device was still intact. Simon knew immediately what it was. This wasn't just a piece of random gear. This could be a record. A digital log of movement, steps, even heartbeats, if it still worked. His pulse quickened as he cleared more snow. Just beneath a slab of ice was a small, boxy object. Its edges were scratched, the outer casing battered, but the seal was still shut. He pulled it free, brushing frost from its lens. It was an action camera, the kind hikers strapped to their packs or helmets. For a moment, Simon froze. He had read Elena's story years before. He remembered the photos, the red jacket, the unanswered questions. And now, in his hands, was something that could belong to her. He radioed the find to local authorities. Within hours, the site was marked, photographed, and documented. Specialists were called in to handle the equipment. When the devices were examined, hope turned into certainty. The GPS watch was indeed hers. On the underside, worn but visible, was an engraving. EF, her initials. The casing was scratched, the strap torn, but the memory chip inside had survived the ice. The action camera was waterlogged but not destroyed. Its waterproof casing had done its job, sealing the fragile electronics from years of snow and meltwater. The outer shell had cracks, but once thawed carefully, it powered on. For the first time in nearly a decade, there were answers waiting, locked inside two small devices that had been trapped in ice since the summer of 2015. The discovery spread quickly through local climbing circles. News outlets caught wind soon after. Lost German hikers' gear recovered in Himalayas after 8 years. Headlines brought her name back into the public eye. But for her family, the reports were more than just news. They were a lifeline. Anna wept when she heard. "It means she was really there," she said. "It means she left something behind." Investigators worked slowly, knowing that one mistake could corrupt the fragile data. They dried the devices in controlled chambers, tested chips, and copied files. Each step brought them closer. And finally, both devices gave up their secrets. The GPS logs, the heart rate spikes, the photos, the videos. 8 years of silence were about to break. Inside those devices were answers no one expected. The GPS watch was the first to speak. When forensic experts pulled the data, they found that much of it had survived. Coordinates, altitude logs, even heart rate readings, all stored in short bursts, frozen since that final trek. Piece by piece, Elena's last movements came back to life. At first, everything looked normal. The logs showed steady climbs across marked routes, each entry matching her planned itinerary. Her heart rate was calm, consistent with a fit hiker used to exertion. The altitudes matched her expected progress. But on day 4, something shifted. The data revealed a sudden detour. Her path veered away from the main trail, pulling her deeper toward the glacier. There was no clear reason. The weather was still stable. The terrain wasn't supposed to be part of her plan. Yet her watch recorded each step, down narrow ridges, across unstable ground, into areas no guidebook recommended. And then her heart rate began to rise. Not gradually, but sharply. A spike. High, then higher, like adrenaline flooding her system. Fear. Exertion. A sudden sprint. No one could be certain, but it was the first sign that something was wrong. Investigators moved to the action camera next. The files were fragile, corrupted in parts, but enough remained to paint a haunting picture. The first images were as expected. Sunlit peaks, a sky painted blue, Elena smiling into the lens. In one frame, she laughed as the wind tugged at her red jacket. In another, she stood proudly on a ridge, arms wide open as if she owned the horizon. These were the Elena everyone remembered. Calm, joyful, alive. But then, the tone changed. The later files were darker, shakier. Footage taken in low light, where snow blurred into shadows. One clip showed her walking fast, breath heavy, camera bouncing in her hand. Another showed only the ground, rocks, snow, her boots crunching quickly as if she was moving with urgency. Then came the sound. In one video, faint but undeniable, her breathing grew louder, harsher. Each inhale ragged, each exhale quick. Behind it, another sound, snow crunching, not hers. The rhythm was different, uneven, heavier, like another set of footsteps, just out of frame. Analysts replayed the clip again and again. Some said it was only the echo of her own movement. Others swore it was distinct, a second presence following close behind. And then came the final file. It was only a few seconds long, blurred and almost impossible to watch without unease. The lens shook violently, capturing nothing clear, just a flash of sky, a rush of snow, the edge of a glove as her hand swung across the frame. Then, a shadow. For a split second, a dark shape crossed in front of the camera. Too close, too sudden, too deliberate. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a tree. It moved, quick and sharp, before the footage cut to black. No scream, no word, just silence. The timestamp showed it was recorded 14 minutes after her last smiling selfie. 14 minutes between peace and panic. When investigators presented the findings, they offered no firm conclusion. The official line: inconclusive evidence. But those who watched the final clip could not shake the feeling that something else had been there. The GPS showed her leaving the trail. The heart rate showed fear. The camera showed shadows. But together, they told a story no one could explain. Was it panic in the thin air? Was it a fatal fall? The final seconds of a stumble? Or was someone or something out there with her, hidden in the silence of the mountain? The devices had given back fragments, but not the truth. And in those fragments was something more unsettling than the years of silence that came before. Because if Elena hadn't been alone in those final minutes, then the mountain wasn't the only one keeping a secret. The evidence raised more questions than it answered. For 8 years, people had wondered what happened to Elena Fisher. And now, with GPS logs, heart rate spikes, and chilling video files, the theories only multiplied. Theory 1. The accident. The simplest explanation was that she slipped. The Himalayas are full of hidden dangers, unstable rocks, sudden storms, crevasses buried under thin layers of snow. Even the most experienced climbers have been lost to a single misstep. Investigators pointed out that her final recordings came just before a shift in weather. Dark clouds had moved in that afternoon, winds rising. A stumble, a fall, or even disorientation in bad visibility could have ended her journey in seconds. The shadow in the footage, they argued, could have been nothing more than a blur of her own arm or a trick of light. To them, this was a tragedy of chance. But Elena's family struggled with this explanation. She was too careful, her sister Anna said. If the weather had turned, she would have set camp. She wouldn't have rushed forward. Not Elena. Theory 2. The human factor. Others believe she wasn't alone. The sound of extra footsteps, the sharp shadow crossing the camera, the sudden spike in heart rate, all pointed, in their view, to another presence on the trail. Online forums latched onto this theory. Who was it? Another hiker? A stranger? A stalker? In whispers among trekkers, rumors grew. One Sherpa recalled hearing from a passing climber that a man in dark clothing had been seen in the same area days earlier, moving without a group, keeping to himself. Another villager spoke of someone who checked into a guest house near the route around the same time. He paid in cash, left no name, and vanished before dawn. None of these accounts were confirmed, but they lingered. If Elena had encountered someone in the wilderness, questions followed. Was it chance? Or was she being followed? And if so, why? Theory 3. Paranoia. Some experts leaned toward a psychological explanation. At high altitude, the human body begins to change. Oxygen levels drop. Judgment becomes cloudy. And even small stress can spiral into fear. Hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, can create panic or hallucinations. Add exhaustion, isolation, and the weight of silence, and even a seasoned hiker can break. In this theory, Elena's GPS detour was a mistake born from confusion. Her racing heart was panic, not pursuit. The strange noises in the footage were echoes, the shadow and accident of motion. The mountain plays tricks, one guide explained. Sometimes the danger is not what's out there, it's what's happening inside you. Yet still, not everyone was convinced, because the rumors of another figure would not die. For years, truckers spoke quietly of seeing a stranger in those ridges, a silhouette watching from higher ground, a figure walking trails long after others had turned back. Some described him as tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the ease of someone who knew the terrain. Others claimed he carried old gear, the kind no modern hiker used. Of course, rumors spread easily in mountains where fear already lives. Some said it was only imagination. Others whispered of bandits, hermits, even ex-soldiers living off the grid. None of it was proven, but one detail tied them all together. Elena had written in her last journal entry, never recovered but remembered by her sister, that she didn't feel alone on the trail. And that single line kept the mystery alive. Was she a victim of bad luck? Was she chased by weather, by fear, by her own mind? Or had someone been there in those last moments, watching, waiting, hidden in the silence of the Himalayas? No answer fit perfectly. Each theory explained part of the story, but none explained it all. And so the mystery deepened, as if the mountain itself refused to give clarity. Because sometimes the truth isn't simple. Sometimes it's layered, half accident, half choice, half shadow. And in Elena's case, the only certainty was this: her last minutes on the mountain were not peaceful. They were filled with fear, and no one could say for sure. Fear of what? For most, finding Elena's gear would have been the end of the story. Proof she had been there. Evidence for the family. Closure of some kind. But for Simon Keller, the mountaineer who discovered the GPS watch and the camera, it became the beginning of something else. Simon wasn't a man who chased headlines. He had been climbing the Himalayas for over 2 decades. To him, the peaks were not mysteries to solve, but places to respect. Yet after holding Elena's belongings in his hands, something changed. He couldn't let go. He wanted to know more. A few weeks after the discovery, he returned. Not as part of an official rescue team, but alone, carrying only his gear, a drone, and a notebook. He knew the terrain better than most. He knew the ridges where avalanches had scarred the ice, the gullies where storms hid their fury. And he knew that sometimes the mountains revealed things only to those who kept coming back. At first, his search seemed futile. The glacier was vast, the ice shifting daily. Drones helped him scan from above, mapping crevasses and ridges in high detail. He marked points where meltwater had exposed dark patches. Most were just boulders or debris, but one caught his eye. On a narrow ledge, half hidden behind a pile of stone, he saw something that did not belong. When he reached the spot, he realized what it was: a small stack of rocks, balanced carefully into a marker. Not natural, not random. Someone had placed them. Beside the marker lay the faint remains of a fire, charred wood, scattered ash, blackened stone. Time and weather had nearly erased it, but not completely. Someone had burned fuel here, high above the tree line, in a place where no tourist would ever camp. Simon crouched, brushing frost from the stones. His breath caught in his throat. The fire pit wasn't old enough to be from the last century, nor recent enough to belong to another climber. It matched the timeline. It matched her. Elena had been here. And if she had built a fire, it meant one thing: she had survived longer than anyone thought. The realization hit Simon with weight. For years, people had believed she vanished suddenly, swallowed by the ice on that final day. But this meant she had fought. She had endured. She had lived at least one more night, maybe longer. Simon sat in silence, imagining her there, cold, exhausted, crouched by a small flame, trying to push back the darkness. He pictured her stacking those rocks, maybe as a signal, maybe as a message, maybe as her way of marking that she was still alive. It was no longer just a tragedy. It was a survival story, one that had been cut short before it could be told. But the marker and fire pit were not the only things that unsettled him. Near the ashes, buried under loose stone, he found something small, a torn scrap of red fabric, sun-bleached, frayed at the edges, but unmistakable. It looked like it had once belonged to her windbreaker. The fabric was deliberate. It hadn't blown there. It was tucked, almost hidden, as if someone or Elena herself had placed it beneath the rocks. Why? To preserve it, to leave a trace, or to hide it from someone else? The thought gnawed at Simon, because the fire, the marker, the fabric, none of it felt accidental. It felt intentional. It felt like she had been signaling, but to whom? He logged the coordinates, photographed everything, and kept searching. Each step only deepened the unease. The silence of the glacier felt heavier now. Not empty but watchful, as if the mountain itself was aware of his presence. At night, camped alone near the ridge, Simon couldn't sleep. The wind howled against his tent, carrying strange echoes. He thought of Elena's last recordings, the sound of her breath, the crunch of footsteps that may not have been her own. And now, here he was, in the same place, listening to the same silence. In his notebook, he wrote a single line. She didn't vanish quickly. She lasted. But survival didn't mean escape. The next morning, he continued searching, determined to follow the clues further, because the mountain was finally giving pieces of her story back. And Simon believed, no, he felt, that there was more waiting, much more. It was his third day on the glacier when Simon found her. He had followed a narrow ravine carved by meltwater, a place where ice walls loomed high and the air felt unnaturally still. His drone had picked up something unusual, an odd shape at the base of a crevice. He climbed down carefully, boots crunching against frozen stone, every step echoing in the silence. And then he saw it, a flash of red beneath a crust of snow. Kneeling, he brushed the ice away with his gloves. First, a sleeve, then the curve of a jacket. The fabric was faded but intact, preserved by the cold. Slowly, carefully, he uncovered more boots, pale bone, a watch still strapped to a fragile wrist. It was Elena. Her body had not been torn apart by avalanche or scattered by wild animals. It was whole, resting in a curled position as if she had lain down. A scarf had been tucked beneath her head like a pillow, and across her hands, someone had placed a flat stone, gently, deliberately. Simon froze. This was no accident. She had not fallen into the crevice by chance. She had been placed here, with care, with intention. The weight of the moment pressed on him. Elena had survived long enough to reach this place, long enough to take shelter, but she had not died alone. Someone else had been here, in her final hours, someone who had chosen to leave her this way. The fire pit, the stone marker, the fabric under the rocks, it all fit now. She hadn't simply vanished. She had been accompanied, at least for part of the journey. By who? That was the question Simon could not escape. He documented everything, the placement of her body, the scarf, the stone. He radioed the authorities, who would arrive the next morning. But he didn't leave immediately. He stayed there in the silence, staring at the fragile remains of a woman whose story the world had tried to forget. The mountain had finally given her back, but not the truth. Not all of it. Because the way she was found whispered of another presence, someone who had been there when she died, someone who had chosen not to speak, not to return, not to tell. As Simon climbed back to his camp that night, the words repeated in his mind, chilling him more than the cold ever could. She hadn't been completely alone at the end. The mountains are older than memory. They have taken lives before, and they will take lives again. But every once in a while, the silence breaks, and a story surfaces from the ice. Elena Fisher's disappearance was never just about one hiker. It was about the questions we carry into the wilderness. Questions about risk, about solitude, about what waits in the places where few dare to go. For her family, the discovery of her remains brought a kind of closure. After 8 years of searching, they finally had somewhere to grieve. No more imagining, no more waiting for a call that would never come. Anna, her sister, could lay flowers knowing Elena was no longer lost to the mountain's shadow. But closure does not erase mystery. The GPS data, the blurred footage, the stone laid carefully across her hands, all of it suggests her ending was not as simple as a slip or a fall. Did she die of exhaustion and cold, with another traveler showing her a final act of kindness? Or was she guided or trapped by someone who never wanted to be found? No one can say for sure, and that is what unsettles us most. The idea that even with technology, satellites, drones, and years of searching, the truth can remain hidden, buried in snow, frozen in silence. The Himalayas gave back her body. They gave back her watch, her camera, her story. But they did not give back the full truth. That part, perhaps, still lies beneath the ice. So we are left to wonder. Was it an accident or something more? A fall into shadows, or a meeting with another soul on the mountain who chose silence over salvation? What we do know is this: Elena was prepared, careful, determined. She didn't give up easily. She fought for survival until the end. And in that fight, she left behind a story powerful enough to outlast the silence that tried to bury it. In the Himalayas, silence isn't empty. Sometimes, it keeps the secrets of those who never came back.